When the Krieg got its fire rate nerfed into the ground, pretty much everybody, myself included, thought the gun was pretty much useless in competitive play. So why did Niko use it in a professional match? Was it just a troll, or does it actually have its use? Well, before we get into it, if you're in the near 90% of people that watch my videos and still aren't subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my new CSGO content and help me get to 30k subs. But for now, let's get into this weird buy from Niko and if it has its purpose. So first, let's go over a quick comparison of the AK and the Krieg. The Krieg is $300 more expensive than the AK, the damage is 6 less than the AK per hit, but technically it has 100% armor penetration compared to the AK's 77.5%, so they both do pretty similar damage against armored opponents. AK does 28 per hit, Krieg does 30, they both kill in 4 hits against armored opponents, both one-shots to the head, but the AK can kill unarmored opponents in 3 hits. But none of that stuff is really that important when you take into the account of the fire rate between the two, which is just an absolutely insane difference, which is why everybody stopped using the Krieg in the first place. Entering sites as a T, unless your aim is absolutely nuts and you enjoy tapping and can kill people on one of your first probably 3 bullets, you're probably not going to really kill with this thing if you're entering and not just playing slow and waiting for peaks. But when you get somebody like Niko, this gun can be pretty alright considering how great of an aimer he is, as you could have seen in the clip that I showed. But still, this gun is practically worse in every way compared to the AK, except maybe you get a scope for $300 extra, but you trade it off for a much worse fire rate. And what's a scope when you're running into sites trying to make space for your team as often as you have to do on T side? Is this gun not just flat out worse than the AK? Is it just completely useless? Well, the thing is, I honestly do think it is much worse than the AK by a pretty big margin, and no one uses it anymore, you can't spray with it, it's really hard to multi-kill if you are getting run at, and there's certain positions where it's flat out useless if you can't land your first shots. But because of the Krieg's uselessness, it might actually be a good gun, and here's why. Let's say you're pretty confident in your aim and your team maybe likes to play rounds slower. Take space and then make a move as to where to go towards the late round. If you have a Krieg on T side, this can better fit your playstyle than the AK, especially if your aim can back it up and you know what fights to take. Obviously, this is pretty situational and kind of forces you to take long range fights, maybe sit back a bit more and kind of rely on your teammates to maybe run in. Maybe on Mirage you can go out mid and fight window early if you know he isn't opping, or you're confident, got the util and the teammates to back you up, and if you die and the CTs pick up your Krieg, maybe you could rush B next round or get somewhere close on the player with the Krieg if you know where he plays. As obviously we've gone over already, his fire rate is really bad, and if you get close to him and you have teammates next to you, he's not really going to be able to multi-kill, if even get one with the insta headshot. So the overall point being, as a T, you've got a lot more space to work with. You can go pretty much wherever you want at the beginning of the round, take whatever fights you want, and eventually you'll have to move on to a site. But if you've got a Krieg, you don't necessarily have to be the first person in. But as a CT, if you have a Krieg picked up off a T's body because maybe you were on FAMAS's or something and wanted a better rifle, you can easily get run down, find it harder to multi-kill, and honestly be limited in the spots you can go and the plays you can make, as you can't really play any close angles with the Krieg and expect to get probably more than 2 kills. 2 kills is kind of pushing it if the T's play it right, and it's kind of just tough. It really limits what you can do. So obviously this can work for or against you if you're a T. CTs may honestly just be able to adapt to it if you're playing good players and use it as a long range weapon if you can't figure out how to make space for your team and get close to them on T side, but I honestly think the Krieg does have some use if you buy it. First, in the aspect that it's not giving the enemy an AK if you die. Second, in the aspect that nobody really uses this thing anymore, nobody sprays with it, so unless they're pretty good aimers, which you're probably not going to find in matchmaking, but I mean Niko bought it, so there's some other use to it, but I'll get into that in a second. Giving this to CTs might actually work out for you if you play around it right. Kind of think of it as an auto or an op or something. You aren't just going to run out in, I guess, long angles into an op or a scouter or whatever. You're going to flash them off, smoke them, whatever it may be, and then get close to them. think of that like the Krieg if the CT has it. You could pretty much use it like that. So you could especially see why it could be used at top level play. Maybe you have a Krieg on T side Inferno, and then you want to rush B the next round because you know a CT picked it up and he's a B player. Molly top car, do all that good stuff, and then run up B. Maybe the CT player is on site with the Krieg and something. He maybe can't get a couple kills. He can't multi-frag because he doesn't have an M4, he doesn't have an AUG, he doesn't have an AK, he just has a Krieg. So it's very, very situational, but I can definitely see a world where this thing can actually be used kind of just to metagame your opponent into oblivion. But I still don't think the Krieg really has a use in competitive play that much, and it's incredibly situational. And Niko probably just bought it to mess around and show off his aim, but you can definitely be a nuisance if you really want to try hard, have a good team that communicates well, and take the right fights if you do buy this gun. And maybe if enough people start doing it, the Krieg will lose its scope or something and just get nerfed into oblivion again, and maybe the CS pros will move on to the next weapon in the meta, the Negev. But on a serious note, I do think that covers everything that I wanted to go over in this video. Be sure to let me know if you do have any thoughts on the Krieg, if you think it has its use in competitive or just the game in general, or is completely useless now, and I honestly hope to see it more in pro play. But as for now, once again, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new and want to see more videos like this one, and check out some of my other content if you're new around here. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.